19. Co-Majestic to Coruscant Command. Standing by to retrieve Lati from Quilora. Be aware we have detected 2 Trade Federation warships approaching from the Tangle Arm to reinforce Quilora. Vengeance is moving to protect our flank. We're almost all at the one-click line, Damon's voice said. Ready when you are. Nana clapped his glove to the left side of his helmet. He feared it was becoming a nervous tick. Good. See you at the EP. Give me a few minutes. Vi made a casual thumbs-up gesture and adjusted his shoulder plate. 5 minutes felt like forever right then. Whoa, what's happening here? Nina said. Duh, hold off, wait one. The light from the front doors had died, and his night vision's visors kicked in. He thought he saw Darman or Tin, another odd flashback now that the stims were wearing off. But then he realized the T-slit visor coming out the door was Hokan's. He opened fire. The hesitation had cost him half a second, an eternity, and he didn't see anyone fall. Vi laid down a burst of plasma bolt rounds, and they raided. Nothing. Then there was another flurry of movement, and someone yelled, "Drop!" But the 3 shapes didn't, at least not until the plasma rounds hit them. It was silent again. Nana paused, as he and Vi began edging forward to check. Someone got up from the blast-cratered ground and sprinted around the far side of the building. Nina and Vi sprayed more rounds and paused again, but there was no more movement. If there's more inside that lobby, Sarge, can I put a bit of anti-armor in there? I don't fancy running with droids behind us. Standard grenades wouldn't trigger the thermal detonators. Lob in 6, he said, and then set the E-Reb to self-destruct. Vi lined up the blaster, easing it a little on its tripod. Nina heard a high-pitched noise like a repulsor lift drive starting up, but then it was drowned out by the whoomp 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 of the first 3 grenades launching and exploding. The doorway of the facility belched black, rolling flames and smoke. Now that's Endex, Nina said, and they ran. They ran over rutted fields and crashed through 2 hedges, and were into the trees before Nina managed to open his comlink and gasp out the take command to Darman. The white flash illuminated the track before them a second or two before the shockwave smacked Nina hard in the back. It threw him forward, his mouth smashed against the interior of the visor, and he tasted blood. When he turned his head and tried to get up, Vi was also flat on his chest, arms out in front, head turned toward him. No, Sarge, Vi said, still seeming totally pleased with life. That was Endex. Gez Hokan found himself on the ground, with his speeder bike upended, its drive still running. The blast was ringing in his ears. He froze, head covered, waiting for incoming cannon fire, but only silence followed. He struggled to his feet and managed to heave the speeder upright again. A steering vane was slightly bent, but it was serviceable. He dusted himself down, and then swung back into the rider's seat. He could see his hands griping the bars. The tan glove on his left hand looked black. It was still red. Sheva had hung on to him. She'd run, as he told her. Her blood had sprayed over him when she was hit. It was the closest he had come to feeling pity in many years. Enough of this. You're going soft, man. Concentrate. Sir. It was hard to identify the voice from a single shout. Hogan turned to check, but there was really only one man who would have struggled to stay with him. Sir. Harati rode up from behind and stopped his speeder, level with his. He had no second rider. Hoken didn't need to ask. I'm sorry, sir, Harati said. They froze when the shooting started. They didn't even drop. Civilians tend to do that, Hogan said wearily. That blast was the facility, judging by the color. That was a high-temperature implosion, not laser cannon. Does it matter? Nothing could have survived that, even in a blast-proof container. If there were any samples of the nanovirus, they're gone now. So there was now no nanovirus in Separatist hands, and no scientist with any degree of expertise in the program either. That made it imperative to retrieve Uthan. Given the blast area of an implosion device, they were using sensitive remote detonators. Hoken was relieved that he had some EMP grenades in his cargo pannier. Find them, Hoken said. He couldn't even trace their route from the drainage systems now. Where would he start? The enemy would need to leave Kulora. They would have a vessel somewhere. If intelligence from Geonosis was any guide, they would have gunships to extract them and evacuate wounded. It was a quiet, backward, rural planet. You could hear motors and drivers for kilometers, especially at night. Hoken powered down the speeder and waited, listening. Etain could feel it long before she saw or heard it. She hadn't been able to detect droids, or so she thought, but she could feel something big disturbing the Force. And it was getting nearer. She wasn't sure if it was mechanical or organic, and it didn't communicate any sense of threat beyond a mild anxiety. Then she heard the rushing air and steady drone of a vessel's propulsion drives. She stopped and craned her neck. Atin and Darman stopped too. Oh, I love that sound, Darman said. What is it? The sound of us getting out of this sea spit in one piece. A Lottie, a gunship. The sound was practically right overhead. As Etain scanned the night sky, she picked out a silhouette against the stars. The vessel wasn't showing any navigation lights. It dipped slightly, its drive changing pitch, and Darman reacted as if someone were talking to him. He gestured and nodded. Then he raved. The gunship picked up speed and lifted higher before shooting away. They tracked us by our comlink transponder, Darman said. Good old Niner. Bless him for knocking out Techlet. Ethan jerked his shoulders to heave Uthan a little higher on his back. "Your carriage, princess," he said to her, far more cheerful than Ethan had imagined him capable of being. His presence felt almost healed, but not entirely. "Want to sit up front?" Uthan had recovered from the sedation enough to squirm. Ethan realized that the scientist was the only person she had ever seen who could convey such rage just by writhing. She didn't envy the soldier who had to untie her. "Your turn, Dawn," Aten said. "Okay." He seemed elated as well as edgy. Ethan could feel it. It was nearly over. They'd pulled it off. She wanted to ask him what he was going to do when he got back to base, but she could guess that it involved a lot of sleep, a hot shower, and food. His dreams were modest. She thought that was a fine example to set, even for a Padawan. She just hoped that she could become a competent officer. She wanted Dawnman's respect. "Come on, Daw," Aten said irritably. "Uthan's starting to weigh a ton. Your turn." "Try this," Ethan said, and lifted with the force. Aten half turned to check what was relieving the weight on his back. Dawnman had almost caught up with him. Crack. Aten pitched forward. Ethan thought he had merely tripped, but Dawnman was now down on the ground, and she followed suit. He was sprawled across Aten with his rifle raised. Aten wasn't screaming, but he was making a rhythmic ah noise, as if he was trying to gulp air. Uthan was lying in a heap on the grass. "Man down," Dawnman said, unnaturally calm. Ethan heard him clearly. He still had the voice unit open. "Sarge, Aten's hit." Whatever Nina's response was, Ethan didn't hear it. Dawnman fired rapidly, and she saw the brilliant rounds fly over her head. Why hadn't she felt anyone behind her? Because she'd been distracted. This was her fault. If Aten died, she would have him on her conscience for the rest of her life. The firing stopped. It was over inside 30 seconds. The world had somehow gone back to the way it was before, except for Aten. Dawnman could obviously see something through his rifle sights that Ethan could not. She watched him get up, run forward, and aim at an object on the ground. He switched on his helmet lamp. "One of Hoken's officers," Dawnman said. "A captain. Is he dead?" "A single shot." "He is now," Dawnman said. This time Ethan wasn't quite as appalled as she had been when Dawnman had dispatched the wounded Umbaran. She was wrapped up in concern for Aten. Her perspective had shifted radically. Aten was now worrying quiet. When Dawnman turned him carefully onto his side, there was a shattered hole in his armor plate, about 20 centimeters below his right armpit, that was leaking blood. Dawnman took a small gray oblong container with rounded edges from his belt and emptied the contents on the ground. He shoved what looked like a field dressing in the gaping hole. and tapped it to the armor. "Get on," Aten said. His voice was shaking. "Go on. Leave me. Don't go all heroic on me, or I'll smack you one. I mean it. Get Uthan out of here. Aten, shut up, will you? I'm not leaving anyone anywhere." Daman was working with all the precision of someone who'd been drilled repeatedly in combat first aid. He nodded at Etain. She grasped Aten's hand and squeezed it hard. That's what a Verpine projectile can do to Catan armor. Easy, brother. I've got you. He removed one of Aten's thigh plates, peeled back the sections of bodysuit, and exposed the skin. He held two short single-use syringes in his hand. "It's going to hurt a bit, okay? Steady." Daman stabbed both needles into Aten's thigh in quick successions. Then he scrawled something on Aten's helmet with a marker and replaced the thigh plate. Etain stared at the letters P and Z, now written on the forehead of the helmet. "P for painkiller," Daman said. He laid Aten's flat on his back, and Z for blood loss control agent, because B looks too much like P when you're in a hurry. "It's for the medics, just in case they don't scan him, so they know what I've dosed him with. Now, this is going to look really odd, but trust me." Aten was flat on his back, breathing heavily. Daman slid on top of him, back to chest, then slipped his arms through Aten's webbing and rolled both of them over so he was lying underneath. Raising himself on his arms, he drew his legs to a kneeling position, and then stood up with Aten secure across his back. He tottered slightly, but he didn't fall. "Easiest way to lift and carry a heavy man," Daman said, his voice sounding a little strained. "I could have done that for you," Etain said. "Yeah, but he's my brother. Besides, you're going to carry Dr. Uthan." Etain felt momentary guilt for not checking on her, but the scientist was still lying there, trussed, quite silent, and no doubt bewildered. Etain leaned over her. "Come on, doctor," she said. She went to lift her, but her hands touched something cold and wet. There was a jagged sliver of pale gray plastoid alloy protruding from just under her ribs. It was shrapnel from Aten's armor. The doctor was bleeding heavily. "Oh no, not this. Look, Daman, look. Fierfek. After all this rotten. No, she's alive. Just get her to the extraction point. They better have a medic on board." The disappointment was sudden and crushing. Etain felt it. It almost made her stop in her tracks, too overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all to move. But it didn't stop Daman, and so she was determined to go on. His absolute discipline was tangible. In a few days, she had learned more from him than she had ever been able to learn from Folia. Being seconds from death so many times drove the lessons home that much harder. Etain also knew it had forged a bond that would cause her enormous pain in years to come. It was worse than falling in love. It was a totally different level of attachment. It was shared trauma. Master Fulia said you could fall out of love, but Etain knew you could never fall out of this, because history could never change. She lifted Uthan across her back by her own arm and jerked her forward until she was comfortably across her shoulders. "Let's move it, Daman," she said, and hardly recognized her own voice. For a moment, she didn't sound like a Jedi at all. Hoken was still on the loose. Nina knew it. He'd seen him, or at least someone in his armor, come out of that facility. The officer whom Daman had shot had just been a young captain, and Hokan was probably doing what the dead captain seemed to have done, and tracked them by the gunship. Their salvation might also prove to be their undoing. "About one more click," Fi said. "Any word on Aten?" "Haven't you got your long-range switch through?" "No. It's one more distraction I can't face right now." Nina was beginning to understand how Fi coped. The man just switched off, sometimes literally. He wondered who or what had taught him to do that, because it wasn't Skarata. Cal Skarata felt all too visibly sometimes. "I hope we get an urban deployment after this," Nina said. "Stay positive. Look ahead. A nice, noisy, confusing city with places to hide and lots of running water. Surveillance, data extractions, easy street. Nah, jungle. You're sick. Jungle's like a city. Lots going on. You're worried about Aten. Shut up, Sarge. I'm just worried about me, okay? Of course you are. Why didn't we just pound this whole region from space? No intel. Virus could have been at several locations. We might not have hit them all, and we'd never have known until it was too late. Just when we were making a good team." "He's still alive, Fi." Nina began walking backwards, playing the tail roll. "He's still alive. Jetta can heal. Daman's done all the right first aid." Nina never did like being tail on patrol, especially at night. He liked it even less when the point man shouted, "Down!" He dropped flat on the grass and looked where Fi was aiming his dice. "Speeder," Fi said. "Guess who? Crossing right to left, ahead. It's got to be Hokan. Can you take him? Clear shot when he passes the trees. Don't hang about, then." Nina counted the seconds, following the speeder bike with his rifle scope. The speeder's movement behind the avenue of Kuvara created a strobe effect. A flare of energy lit up his night visions, and the rider was thrown off the vehicle in a cloud of vapor. "That's the way to do it," Nina said. They waited the mandatory few seconds to check that Hokan was truly down. There was no movement at all. Nina could see the glint of Gadan's eyes in the grass, a sign that at least someone thought the fighting was over, and that it was safe to come out again. Nina was on his feet and Fi was up on one knee when Hokan rose from the grass like a spectre. He staggered a few steps and raised his weapon. Nina didn't hear him fire, but he heard a projectile whistle past him and hit something with a loud crack. Verpine shatter guns were silent, and they were accurate. If Hokan hadn't been winded by Fire's round, then Nina would have had the same hole blown in him as Atin. Sarge, when I kill him, can I have his armor? Fire asked. You get to take it off him personally. I needed that motivations, thanks. Still see him? No. A blaster round hit the grass a meter in front of Fi and sent sparks swirling. Their enemy wasn't a mindless tinny or a stupid Requay. He was a Mandalorian, a natural-born fighter, dangerous even when wounded. He was very much like them. You think that gunship's going to wait? Fi asked. Not once they have Uthan. Perfect. Fi snapped on the grenade attachment and aimed. Maybe we shouldn't have ditched the E-Reb. The night lit up with that explosion. Fi raised his head a little, and blaster file flowed back a meter, farther off target than before. You go right of him while I keep him busy. Nina edged forward on his elbows and knees, these crooked in his arms. He'd moved about 10 meters when the air above him made a frying noise, and a blaster bolt took the seeds' heads off the grass above him. If it hadn't been for that Verpine, things would have been a lot simpler. Majestic wouldn't wait much longer. The stims had worn off fully now, and Nina was feeling the impact of days of hard tabbing, little sleep, and too much noise. He made himself a promise there and then. If he and Fi weren't getting off Kurloa, then neither was Gez Hokan. But Mandalorian or not, Hokan was just one man, and he was facing two men who were at least his match. Nina didn't underestimate him, but the end result was almost certain. Sooner or later, he would deplete the power cells. Still, time wasn't on their side right then. Not good at all, Nina said. Darman, Nina here. What's your position? He sounded out of breath, slow going. Sarge, about 10 minutes from the EP. Ask them if they'll keep their meter running, will you? Just saying goodbye to Gez Hokan. I'll drop Atin off and... Negative, Da. We can handle this once we crack his armor. Stand by. Fi was edging forward, looking for a clear shot. Nina, running out of patience, looked about for some cover he could use to get a position to the side of Hokan. The flash of a weapon discharge caught his eye, but he didn't hear anything except Fi beginning to say something over the comlink, and then a very brief searing peak of high-pitched noise. Then everything went silent and black. For a moment, Nina thought he'd been hit. He couldn't hear Fi, and he couldn't see the data from his HUD. There was no green image of the field, and the trees behind it in his night vision visor. But he could feel his elbows squarely braced in the soil, and he could feel his deets still in his hands. No pain, but if you were hurt badly enough, you sometimes didn't feel a thing. It took him several slow seconds to realize his helmet's systems were totally dead. His face felt hot. He wasn't getting air. He pulled off the helmet and squinted through the scope of his DC-17. The night vision scope picked up his image. Vi had taken his helmet off too, and had his hand inside it, pressing controls frantically. EMP grenade, Nina thought. Hokan's droided us. You use electromagnetic pulse charges against droids, but they were equally effective against delicate electronics attached to Rets. The enhanced Katana helmets, 3 times the price of an ordinary trooper's versions, were packed with sophisticated prototype systems, vulnerable systems. Nina crawled slowly and carefully toward Phi. A couple of blaster bolts went wide. He lay flat head to head with him. "He's fried our helmets," Phi whispered. "Don't they test these things properly? I bet some civvy thought nobody would use EMPs against Rets." "Yeah, I might look him up when we get back. They should reset." "How long?" "No idea. D still works, though. As long as he puts his head up. I could do with one of Daw's flashbangs. Doesn't fit the D's anyway." "Can you see him at all?" No, wait. There he is." Nina had to track back and forth a couple of times before he spotted Hokan through the scope. "Got any of the IEDs in easy reach?" 6. "How far can you throw?" "Far enough." "Wide as you can. Scatter them across him." Nina laid down, suppressing fire, while Phi's bounced up and down, lobbing the little makeshift bombs and dropping flat again. Nina took the detonator control. "When I hit this, you go wide that way and try to get side on to him." Phi rolled slightly to one side, bracing on his right arm for a quick start. Nina hit the det. Phi bobbed up. Nothing happened. A blaster round seared the grass between them, and Phi threw himself down again. "We really must talk to procurement about hardening our electronics," Phi said mildly. "I fear we might be back to old-fashioned soldiering. I'm fresh out of bayonets. Sergeant Cal would have an idea." "You got his number on you?" "I'm going to scream." "What?" "Don't laugh. This man's a nut. If he thinks I'm down and badly injured, he won't be able to resist coming over and slitting my throat. And then I give him a surprise party. Anything that resolves this fast? Okay, kid, off you go." Nina suddenly realized he didn't actually know how to scream, but he'd heard enough terribly wounded men to make a fierce stab at it. He threw back his head and let go. 20. I don't know who the good guys are anymore, but I do know what the enemy is. It's the compromise of principles. You lose the war when you lose your principles. And the first principle is to look out for your comrades. Cal's Karata. The gunship was the most beautiful craft Darman had ever seen. It came into view as he staggered through the lines of bushes and into the newly plowed field. Its cockpit bubbles gleamed like a hollow of Cloud City, and its cannon turrets had the symmetry of the finest Naboo architecture. He even loved its rust and the dents in its rings. "Look at that, Aten," he said. "Sheer art, Aten. Yeah, nearly there. White trooper armor came running toward him, with a Gran in a medic's uniform, just behind them. Aten's weight lifted from his back, and he struggled to pull his arms free of the webbing. He followed the stretcher, trying to talk to the medic. "Verpine projectile, right side of his chest," he said. "Painkiller, 5 cc's of—" "I can see," the Gran said. "Neat job, Private. Now get in that ship." When he looked around, troopers had taken Uthan from Etain, and she was walking toward the gunship, stopping to look over her shoulder every few steps. General Olegan Zay stepped down from the troop cabin and bowed his head very slightly in her directions. She slowed down and stopped to return it. It struck Darman as a remarkably formal greeting under the circumstances. Behind this tableau of Jedi etiquette was a scene from a nightmare, with medics working on both Aten and Uthan, removing armor, cutting garments, hooking up transfusion lines, calling for more dressings. It was like watching two parallel worlds, each wholly oblivious to the other. They didn't look at Darman at all, but the ARC trooper who jumped down beside the general took off his helmet and simply stared at him in silence. Something black moved in the shadows of the ship, and then emerged slowly to sniff the air with a long, glossy snout. It was Valakil. He had come home. Darman could hardly say that he recognized the Gurlanin, because this one looked indistinguishable from Jannat. But he could guess. "Private Aten is still collecting scars, I see," Valakil said, "and my consort is impatient and waiting for me. I have to go." Jannat, Darman shrugged, embarrassed. "She's been an extraordinary help to us, sir. A sixth member of the squad, in fact. I'm sure she will tell me all the details of what has made he so very excited for the past few days." And then he was gone, loping across the field and into the bushes. Darman hoped the Republic wouldn't disappoint the Gurlanins. They served as well as any soldier. "You've done remarkably well, Padawan," they said, "especially without the guidance of a master. Quite exceptional, in fact. I think that this may hasten your progress toward your trials as far as the Council is concerned. With the supervision of a master, of course." Darman expected delight or embarrassment or something equally positive to soften Etain's expression. He knew she believed she was unfit to be a Jedi Knight, or even a Padawan at times. He knew it was the one thing she lived for. But the elevation didn't appear to move her at all. She didn't even appear to hear what Zay had said. "Master, where are Nina and Phi?" Etain asked. Zay looked bemused. Who? Sorry, Master. The two other men from Omega Squad. Daman felt the scrutiny of the ARC even more keenly now. He'd only seen ARCs a couple of times before, and they came as close to scaring him as anyone supposedly on his side ever could. Zay shook his head. You're the first to make it here. They'll be here, sir, Daman said. He flicked open his helmet-to-helmet comlink. If the ARC was listening in, it was too bad. Sarge, Phi. Time to get a move on. There was no sound at all in his ear. Not even static. He switched toward the alternative frequency. And still, there was nothing. 9F5. Are you receiving? He checked the diagnostics mode of his HUD. His helmet was fully functional. He could see the crevice on Geonosis again, standing behind the cooling, ticking E-Web, trying to raise Tala, Finn, and Jay. He couldn't see the biometrics data from their suits on his HUD. No, not again. Not again, please. Ma'am, I'm not getting any response. What does that mean? He could hardly bear to say it. The helmets are offline. I don't think they made it. They're dead, Zay asked. They're not dead, Etain said firmly. Ma'am, I can't raise them at all. No, I don't care. They're alive. I know they are. You have to go, Zay said. If you don't go now, you could be flying straight into a battle with Trade Federation's vessels. We've attracted a lot of attentions. The general turned back to the two medics working on Uthan. Is she going to survive? She's in a very bad way, sir. We need to move her. Keep her alive any way you can. Prepare to lift off, Etain. Master, there are two men still out there. They're dead. No, I can feel them. I know them, sir. I know where they are. They're not even hurt. We must wait for them. We must also save Uthan and get you two out of here. They've destroyed the virus. Isn't that what matters? You can't abandon them now. Daman could see she was at that point where she would either collapse or do something extreme. Her face was drawn tight, and her pupils were dilated. It was an expression that scared him. He's seen it a few times in the last few days. The gunship's drives were throbbing now. Etain still had one boot on the platform, and the other firmly on Kaloran soil. Etain swallowed hard. Oh. Daman thought. Just bite your tongue, ma'am. Don't react. But he felt what she was feeling. All that sweat and terror and pain for nothing. All that when they could have bombed the facility and gone home. All that, and Aten fighting for his life, and Nina and Phi either dead or marooned here. I will not leave without them, Etain said. I regret disobeying you, Master, but I must. Zay registered visible annoyance. You will do as I ordered, he said quietly. You're compromising the mission. We need those men. They're not expendable. We are all expendable. Then, sir, I'm expendable too. She lowered her head slightly, looking up at Zay, more challenging than coy. An officer's duty is the welfare of her men. I see that Master Furia taught you little about obedience, but a great deal about sentimentality. Tommen dared to interrupt. He couldn't stand seeing Jedi Masters arguing. It was painfully embarrassing. Look, I'll stay, ma'am, he said. Go with Atin. See he's okay. Despite Scarlata's frequent assurances that their lives had meaning, Tommen had accepted the hierarchy of expendability. It was not only natural in the Grand Army, but also necessary and inevitable. His life was a more valuable defense asset than a clone trooper's. The Orc's life was more valuable than his. But the mirror that Etane's loyalty and care held up in front of him had made him see himself as a man. Yes, Nina and Phi deserved better. They all did. Zay ignored Darman. You must go. More separatist vessels are heading this way. And I know how this pains you, but... Etane pounced off her back heel into the troop cabin in one move. For a moment, Darman thought she had changed her mind. But that wasn't Etane at all. She took out her lightsaber and held the glowing shaft a handspan away from the power conduit running along the spine of the airframe. She could ground them with one move. Zay's jaw was set. Nobody else moved except for the Gran medic, working on Atin, who seemed oblivious to the drama. A quality Darman suspected was honed by working under fire. Master, Etane said, either all of Omega Squad leaves Quilora, or nobody does. This is a foolish act, Etane. His tone was very calm. You must see the necessity of this. No, Master, I don't. He's going to do some of that Jedi stuff on her. Tommen thought, no, please. He couldn't see the Orc's expressions, but he could guess it was one of his astonishments. Etane, this is precisely why you must resist attachment. Oh, he doesn't know her at all, Darman thought. If only he'd... Her lightsaber was still ready to slice through the conduit. As Jedi, we say we revere all life. Are we prepared to live at that belief? Are these soldiers' lives worth any less than ours? Because we had them created? Because we can buy more of them if these are destroyed? They are soldiers, Etane. Soldiers die. No, Master, they're men. And they fought well. And they're my responsibility. And I would rather die than live with the knowledge that I abandoned them. It was so silent that time seemed to have frozen. Zay and Etane were locked in a wordless argument. Then Zay shut his eyes. I feel your certainty has its roots in the Force, he said. There was a sigh in his voice. What's your name, Darman? So you have names, do you, Darman? Go where she directs you. She values your lives more than she values becoming a Jedi Knight. Etane made as if to follow him. You stay, ma'am, please. No, she said. I won't leave you, any of you. She was holding her lightsaber as if she were a part of it now. Not like something she feared would bite her. I realize this is gross disobedience, Master Zay. But I really don't think I'm ready to become a Jedi Knight yet. You're completely right, Zay said calmly. And we do need these men. Talman followed her, looking back for a second at the general. He looked as if he was smiling. Talman could have sworn he seemed almost proud. Gaz Hokan had expended almost every round he had. He was down to his vibroblade, the lightsaber, and the last 2 projectiles in his verpine now. He pressed his glove hard into his thigh and checked again to see if the wound was reaping fluid. He couldn't feel any pain. His glove came away wet. The blaster burn had gone deep through skin, nerves, and fat, cauterizing blood vessels, but exposing raw tissue that repped plasma. He wondered what kind of injury was making the Commando scream like that. A high-pitched, incoherent sobbing scream that trailed off and then started up again. Hokan couldn't see the man's comrade. He knew he had won, because he had been hit from 2 separate positions. Maybe the other was dead. He listened a little longer. He'd heard many men die. Whatever their species, whatever their age, they almost always screamed for their mothers. Clone soldiers didn't have mothers as far as he knew. So this one was screaming for his sergeant. The sergeant was called Cal or something like it. It was hard to tell. For some reason, that made it unbearable. For once, Hokan could not despise weakness. Whatever he thought of the Republic and the loathsome sanctimonious Jedi, this was a Mandalorian warrior out there, used and discarded. He would finish him. It was the decent thing to do. A wounded man could also return fire, so he wasn't going soft, not at all. He was simply ending the battle. Hokan knelt and looked around. It was clear. Even so, he struggled to crawl with his head down toward the directions of the screams. They were quieter now, a series of gulping sobs. Sarge, don't leave me. Sergeant Cal. Sarge. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. How dared the Republic use Jango Fett to create this abomination? How had Fett let this happen? Hokan edged closer. He could see a body in the grass now. He could see light-colored, dirt-caked metallic armor, very similar in design to his own, but bulkier and more complex. And now he was close enough to see the face with the mouth wide open. The man had his arms folded tight across his chest. He was sobbing. It was Jango Fett, many years before. Hokan drew himself up on his knees and knelt a couple of meters from the wounded Commando, absolutely astonished. I'm sorry, my brother, he said. The lightsaber would have been fast, but it was a disgrace to use the Jedi weapon to kill a Mandalorian man. It was too much like reenacting Jango's fate at Geonosis. Hokan drew his vibroblade instead. It's not your fault. They made you like this. The Commando opened his eyes and focused at a point just past him, as Hokan had seen many dying men do. They all seemed to see ghosts, at the final moment. It was only then that Hokan heard the sound of a lightsaber, and it was too late. "You cut that fine," Nina said. It was the only time Daman had ever seen him look shocked. He wiped his face with the palm of his glove. "And where were you, Fi?" "Thanks a bunch. I could have been filleted. You were supposed to slot him." Fi searched through the decapitated Hokan's jacket. I could see Dot and Commander Etain behind him. "I knew you were probably okay." He paused, and the rifling grew more vigorous. "Here you go, ma'am. I think you ought to have this." I handed a short cylinder back to Etain. It was Master Castellier's lightsaber. It was a matter of honor to return it. They do work well against Mandalorian armor, don't they? Etain didn't seem remotely triumphant. She took the hilt and turned it over in her hand, before placing it in her pocket. Daman wondered how long it would be before she sheathed her own lightsaber. She was still clutching it in one hand, its blue blade humming and shimmering. As she trembled, she was focusing. Daman reeled Fi not to make the obvious comment that killing someone with a lightsaber was nice and clean, no guts, no mess. For once he kept his gallows humor to himself, and simply walked a few paces away to recover the genuine Mandalorian helmet he had decided to appropriate. "You want to put that away now, ma'am?" Daman said gently. "We're done here." Nina got to his feet and saluted her in best formal parade fashion. "Thank you, Commander. You don't mind me calling you that now, do you?" She seemed to come back to the here and now. The shaft of blue light vanished. "It's an honor," she said. Daman called back on the comlink. General Zay had kept his word. The gunship was still waiting. They set off in column, picking up speed until they broke into a trot. The gunship was surrounded by a skirt of billowing dust. Its drive had been idling so long that the heat of the downdraft had dried the top layer of soil. Etain didn't care if the ship had taken off. She hadn't abandoned her squad. Nothing else mattered after that. And although she knew it had been a deliberate decoy, the sound of Nina's screaming would haunt her forever. He must have heard that for real at least once in his life, to have mimicked it so horribly well. She felt sick, and it was not because she had killed Gez Hokan, and that filled her with shame. She understood fully now why attachment was forbidden to Jedi. The ARC trooper was pacing at a slow, regular square, hands clasped behind his back, head down, and Etain would no longer make the assumption that he was lost in thought. He was probably listening to comm traffic in the private world of his helmet. General Zay was sitting patiently on the ship's platform. "Are you ready now?" She held out Master Fulio's lightsaber to him. "Omega Squad recovered it. I felt it should return it to you." "I know what you're going through, Padawan. But that's no comfort, Master. A concern for those under your command is essential. but it carries its own pain if you identify too much with your troops. Yes, it did sound as if Zay had known that dilemma. There are always casualties in war. I know, but I also know them now as individuals, and I can't change that. No clone trooper, no commando, not even an ARC trooper, will ever be an anonymous unit to me now. I'll always wonder who's behind that visor. How can I be a true Jedi and not respect them as beings? With all that entails, Zay was studying his hands a little too carefully. Every good commander in history has had to face that, and so will you. If I'm a commander, then may I accompany them on their next mission. I suspect that would not be for the best. And what do I do now? How can I go back to everyday duties after this? There are no everyday duties now. We're at war. I will not be leaving. I have come to do what work I can here. Work? What will happen to our allies, the Glanans, if we abandon them now, with enemy forces in the area? I'm here to operate with them, and try and make Krillora as inhospitable to separatists as we can. I'm glad we are honoring our commitment, Master. You know this land better than anyone now. You would be a valuable asset here. And when will more troops join you? I'm afraid we'll have to continue the covert work for the time being. We would need to disappear. We, Eating could think of nothing worse than staying on Krillora, with its terrible memories and uncertain future. The nearest she had to friends was a squad of commandos who would be deployed on another mission within days. She would be working with a master she didn't know. She was alone again and scared. Etain, you have duties, Zay said quietly. We all have. We talk about duty when it's easy, but living it is hard. And he didn't need to add what she knew he was thinking. That she needed to be separated from the object of her recent and desperate wartime attachment. She needed to let her squad go. It was no different from what was asked of soldiers every day. I would like to play a useful role in the future of Krillora, Master. She hoped Darman wouldn't think she was turning her back on him, and that he was after all just a glorified droid to her, an asset to be used in battle, and expended if necessary. But I would still find it a comfort one day to know how Omega Squad is faring. I understand, Zay said. The choice is yours, though. You can go with Omega Squad, or you can stay. You might even request that one of the squad remains here. One of the squad. Maybe he thought she was just a girl who would become too attached to a young man when neither of them would ever be able to take the relationship farther. He was testing her, challenging her to make the choice a proper Jedi Knight should make. Yes, she had become close to Darman. He'd been the making of her, but she cared at an inexplicably fundamental level about all of them. I don't think caring about your troops is a weakness, she said. The day we stopped caring is the day we turned our backs on the Force. She dug her nails into her palms. Zay was right, though, and it was going to hurt. She sat on the platform beside Zay in silence, eyes closed, composing herself. The ARC trooper suddenly jerked his head up. "General, sir, we absolutely must go now." "General Zay," Nina said, and touched his glove to his temple. "Sorry we kept you. Are we ready to lift?" "We don't have time for a mission debriefing, but perhaps you'd like a moment with your commander," Zay said, and beckoned to the ARC trooper to follow him. It was a gracious gesture. Etain watched him walk to the rear of the ship to offer her some privacy, apparently supervising the offloading of equipment. She wondered if they had managed to land Zay's starfighter somewhere. She'd worry about that later. She beckoned the commandos to her. "What's going to happen to you now?" she said. "Next mission. Have they assigned us to you?" She wondered whether a lie might be in order. She looked at Daman. "Not exactly," she said. "I'm staying here with General Zay." Daman and Nina both averted their eyes, looking at the ground, nodding as if in agreement. Vi raised his eyebrows. "I'm really going to miss you, Commander. Just when we were shaping up. Typical of the Army, eh?" He rapped his knuckles on Nina's back plate, pushing him a fraction toward the gunship. "Make a move then, Sarge." "Hope to serve with you again, Commander," Nina said, and saluted her. "And don't ever think you didn't earn that rank, will you?" Etain wished they hadn't left her alone with Daman. She wanted a quick exit, with no time to think and make a stupid emotional comment. "I chose to stay," she said. "I really would have liked to have stayed part of the team. But I'm not the officer you need." Daman said nothing. Of course. How could he ever have learned how to take his leave of a friend? All his brief life had been spent among his own kind, immersed in warfare, real or virtual. This was where he became a 10-year-old child again. His embarrassment and confusion were palpable. "You could remain here with me and General Zay," she said, "and I'd know you were safe. You have that choice." He really was a child now. His eyes were fixed on the ground. He was flicking one of the switches on his rifle back and forth over and over. "Just me, ma'am?" She felt she was testing him now. Yes. The gunship's drive rose in frequency. A high whine. The pilot was more than impatient to leave. "I'm sorry, Commander," Daman said, at last. For a moment, he really did seem to be considering it seriously. "I have a job to do." "I can't pretend I won't miss you," she said. Daman's glaze didn't flicker. I've got about 10 years left. But I'll be with my brothers, doing what I do best. It's all I've ever known. Like going home, really." He bent his head and snapped on his helmet, becoming one of the faceless again. "You take care, Commander." "And you," she said, and watched him run to the platform and grasp Vi's outstretched arm to be hauled inboard. The drive roared into higher gear, and the gunship shook slightly. Etain turned and walked away, in such a crouch to steady herself against the downdraft. She speeded up into a hunched run until she found a tree and sat down in the lee of it, with her back to its trunk. And she let the tears run down her face. All that she was and all that she would be in the future was because a clone soldier had put such undeserved faith in her that she had become that Jedi he imagined she was. She could now harness the Force in a way she had never been able to at Filia's side. She thought of that look of complete faith. She thought of his stoic acceptance of his duty, and of the fact that his life would be brief and bright. Whatever happened, he had never known a moment of self-pity. She had learned the most important lesson of all from him. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand and hoped Zay wasn't watching. Etain didn't know if she would ever see Daman or Omega Squad again. She did know, though, that in days to come, every clone trooper or commando or ARC that she might have to order into battle would be neither anonymous nor meaningless, nor expendable. Under that grim helmet was a man, someone just like her, a human being, but one without the freedom or the lifespan afforded to her. Etain Mukan stood up and walked back into the clearing at the edge of the field to watch the gunship lift into the early morning sky. This has been Star Wars Republic Commando Hard Contact by Karen Travis. Hopefully you enjoy the book, and this is Al Party Fault signing out.